Hola, sotatni chamala tashitele ane tangato cheta cheta ngotsu sharwa ane da semjong kundili shebe semjong ngapche ngakchi gananga detsen tukba de jangir je ta jangir je te karre na anyet tang yoba tang tokba tang yoba nam so de ta de dum che ona jangir je na anyet tang na yoba tang na tokyo to de jangir je de karre na ane anyet je ane yoba che ane tokba de ane kyopa teje de la jangir je ze wa ta so ngo ole ma yongore ta tindi de so la jangir ze gwa karla de na ane tro ta tro sem da sem jong da yana ane kerlong gewa ta ma gewa ta lo ma ta shiri wa ne ko jangir de giru ya de kare de gewa ta ma gewa ta lo ma ta 아니 지르를 반결로 그래. 개와당 가르데 트로당 그롱 개왕기 개와당 마개와다 로마타 지르슨 지르 인전로야 셈종들라 아니 시요래 다 도도트 시요. 음.
So I'd like to say hello to everybody, and today we're going to be exploring within the 51 mental factors, the sixth category. This last category, which talks about the variable mental factors. And so these variable mental factors are sleep, regret, inquiry, and analysis. So in the verse of summary here in the text, it says the four changeable ones are sleep, regret, inquiry, and analysis. So each one of these are something that we're going to explore and try to understand their nature and so forth. And the reason why these mental factors are called variable is because it depends upon what they're associated with, which means what type of main mind or what type of other mental factor, they can be variable, they can be interchangeable sort of nature in a sense. It also means that they are variable, these mental factors, because they depend upon motivation. Depending upon one's non-virtuous motivation or virtuous motivation or neutral motivation, these mental factors also result in being non-virtuous, virtuous, and neutral. So this is why we talk about, because of this changing sort of virtue, non-virtue, or neutral quality of these mental factors, that's why they're called variable or changeable mental factors. And this is something that we will explore further throughout the talk.
Oh, teni semjong shigen ge da tangbo ni zhe de. Da nga zo ni de yong zhe ge ni ku zhe chi ni de yo wa. Teni ge ni de le ani ngo de kar de na lu jwa dang nyam chong wa dang ngar wa dang ani mumbi tsama ye la che ba so ji gyu la de ne ani wang shi ye la ji ba nang de de ber chi semjong chi la ya ani ni la wo re 다데 가르라오르나 리치와 땅제 아토 니콘데 리마 치보 즈보 지고 타워 차네 니콘로레 야나 냠총와 땅제데 마 즈보마 또 냠총총차 또마 짐도와 텐디 갑사 야 니콘데 데토 아니 그 길을 야피하고레 아니 키야 그 길을 아니 나라와 땅제 온데 가서 레칸로 텐디 슈 레아다 야나 칼레 슈 카디아 탕체디아 텐디 갑사 아니 니레 그레 아니 야나 멈비 참마예라 체바 멈바제디 나콘로 아토니 마크 갑사 가르체 거다 무글라 레로 나포당 아니 가르데 레로 트리 갑근도 트리자니 가르데 총화데 소나라 잘라 무가비아가 아토 바스 단테 니나는 로티 아니 무가비아게 테 레나 보시도 어데인디 멈비 참마 예라 체바 zon데 멈바 zon데 나본로 예라 체바 나보 카도 텐디 소소 셈라 트디 그네네 데데나 아니 레옹 거라 레네 데네 니 큰로 소지 줄라테네 데소 주 니크가 줄레데오 줄라테네 다 니모네데 간디 그거레잖아 왕시 예란지바 나데 더버체바스 왕시 저로 왕보 묵시당 나시당 아니 류시당 제시당 나시라서 다 왕시 나요로와 대 유럽판 죽바데 수 드네 나한테 더버치바 대소파 예라 주모토 나한테 더버치베 셈조 줄라야 니라 오레세 니 그모데 텐디레세 음
And so now, if we start exploring the first of these mental factors in this category, the first one is sleep. So sleep really here refers to what we all commonly know as sleep, and this activity of, just kind of laying down and resting, this sleep that we're very much familiar with. So here, if we're looking at the definition here in the text, it says this is a mental factor that draws the object perceiving sense consciousness inward as a result of its causes. The causes such as the body becoming heavy, weak, and weary, and the mental attention attending to a dark image, and so forth. It may be virtuous or non-virtuous or new. Okay, so here, this definition of sleep is explaining the different causes which will bring about sleep. And the first one here, which is mentioned, is the becoming heavy. So we're probably quite familiar with this at the moment. When we lie down to go to sleep, we notice that our body tends to become very heavy and kind of sinking down. So this kind of sinking in the sense of the body is one of the causes which can bring about sleep. It can also be sleep can be resulting from a lack of kind of energy. And when it's time for us to go to sleep, we notice that we feel, physically kind of weak, like a lack of energy or weak energy. This can also bring about sleep. Then there's also this dimension of weariness resulting from, having been sort of, tired because we've exerted ourselves throughout the day, the body feeling weary and kind of worn out. So this can also bring about sleep. Then there's the mental attention attending to a dark image, which is, if you cover your eyes with some cloth, and we often see in hotels nowadays, they have these little sort of things that you cover your eyes with to make a dark space in order to kind of induce sleep. You also see on the bus and so forth, these are often handed out, these things to make the space, your sight kind of dark in order to bring about sleep. So these are different causes which are listed to make the mind sort of, to bring about this mental factor of sleep, and for the individual to sink into sleep. And then when we talk about happens, when one, after these causes have come about and sleep is actually happening, there's actually in the definition, we have this aspect that draws the object perceiving sense consciousness inwards. So this means that our sense consciousnesses, our 5 sense consciousness, eye, ears, nose, and so forth, all of these are kind of drawn inwards while this mental factor of sleep is actually functioning within us.
Tendiga Wangshi Nanda Dabarchibi Semjon de Anire Dores. Ta Nitela Gewatan, Korang Wochibi, Gewatan, Magewatan, Lomata, Samga Yores. Te cha Gewata Magea Lomata, Samga Chando, Jimson Karazina, Ko Kurlongo Wangi. Pena Ma Gonda, Ma Nika Labolaya, Kandon, Gejordan. Yana kumchola tebatan chobapa la soba tendigo gesem ngod jerne nikondona tendigo nyete gewa chando res yang tena goma nikondi nimi kon la soso magasala mul jari showatan tsitsa mewatan yana tendigo trato dan densem tendigo Sanlo Mambo ya corne, any persona, Tendi anyete, Magewa chando red. Tendi Gaya Maimba, Gevi Chola Sanlo Matan, Magevi Chola ya Sanlo Matan, Kerlon, Tendi Kerlon Lomatan, Tendi Wanga, New persona, Tendi anyete, Lomata chando red. Tendi Sontan, Kerlongo Wangi, Tandander Janger. Jen Guruate Nite, so Kerlon Wangi. Kerlon Wangi, Gewata, Magewata, Lomata, Jenda, Jend, Jirua in Sonta, Nicola Jangela Grace.
And so, like I mentioned, while this mental factor of sleep is sort of active in the individual, there's this kind of drawing in of these our five sense consciousnesses, yeah? Then the other aspect in this definition here, which is to be sort of explained or understood, is that it says it may be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. And so why can the mental factor of sleep be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral? The reason for this is because it has to do with our motivation. If before going to sleep in the evening, we spend time doing various prayers or various recitations, making requests to the three jewels, making offerings, and sort of inducing and generating a virtuous state of mind, then this means that the sleep which follows will also follow in the same kind of flow, also be a virtuous state of mind, yeah? And then on the other hand, if before going to sleep, one is thinking about and contemplating a lot, sort of a conflict or entering into conflict with somebody or developing a competitive mind or jealous state of mind, then before falling asleep, then this will mean that the sleep which follows will be non-virtuous, because we're filling our mind with these non-virtuous sort of thoughts. And similarly, if there is no particular sort of virtuous state of mind, there is no particular non-virtuous state of mind, the mind is very much in a kind of neutral state, then this means that the sleep which follows as well, which will be itself neutral, it'll have that neutral quality. And so this is what we're talking about here when we talk about these variable mental factors, these changeable mental factors, is because depending upon the motivation, mainly upon the motivation here, the sleep can either be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral.
Tani tati kondale ya kunti na la kare sonrezena ni kanjena ni jigila tene gewatan ma gewata loma tendans tu mayimba tan rigpa tan merigpa la sem dapa temu gi charto bateze jawashur tenji bilejen noze tate sonreze tati tonda te karezena ta ni jigila tene zeondi ganla sonya tere li chiwata nyam chonwata ngarwata mambi tsamayela chebade te so ni jigire de ore tene ngod karezena kora magewata loma tanda karze gewata magewata loma tan tendi ngo cha ore tendi sonta ta ni kubi ditsodela didan timayimba che tene rigba ta mrigba la ane sem daba tumugu charto bareze tanda tu somgange cheta anyute ane karde nyut nyumochen anyute tumugu charto bareze gevenyete do tumugu charto bachado mare ane koranga chele da karze jawa shurui tenjibi lechen reze jawa shura zena ngato anyukasona lega de shondora joke chito pena guban rojila loptsen yona guban anye shorsona gada cheka par anye shorsona ko jawate loptsen ge jawate shondora ta na je lekando re karina ko jawa shuri tenjibi lejenji chade oreze ngato nyze de ma kunodi wanshi de to nala tsur dutne ane karzata ane shibaragba wanshi deto mewa chagdo ore di kapsa ane di kapsa tene pa ane ni tubo ma imba che ni ane karzo sambo ro tendi kubi kapsa malam damanda tendi meya yores ale tamote digishana tikser
And so now if we look at the definition which is presented in the Compendium of Knowledge, it says, what is sleep? Associated with delusion, it draws the mind in an independence on the cause of the sleep. It may be virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral, timely, suitable, or unsuitable. It functions as a basis for loss of activity. So here, when it's talking about the causes here, independence on the causes of sleep, it's the points that we've just studied just now. So the causes being the body becoming heavy, weak, weary, and the mental attention attending to a dark image. These are the causes of sleep, yeah? Then we have this idea that it may be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. So this is independent upon the motivation, like we've explored. And then there's this extra sort of points which are mentioned here in this definition, which are in relation to the timely, untimely, suitable, or unsuitable, and saying that it functions as a basis for loss of activity. Yeah, there is also an extra dimension here in this definition, which is introduced by it saying it's associated with delusion. So sleep is part or is associated with ignorance. Yeah, it's part of that poison. And in this definition, when it talks about that this mental factor serves as a basis for loss of activity, this means that when the mental factor of sleep is active within us, let's say one falls asleep and we have a class at 9 o'clock, because we are asleep, we have actually a chance to miss our class and to miss achieving or accomplishing any kind of work or task we might aim to do. So in this sense, this is why the mental factor of sleep has this function as a basis for loss of activity, a kind of not accomplishing a particular activity because one is fast asleep. And there's also another interesting thing to reflect upon when we think about sleep. It's in relation to these inward, when our consciousnesses, our sense consciousness are drawn inward, we have a kind of deep sleep when we're really kind of in the gross sort of mind is really kind of not functional. And then you have a type of sleep which is much more kind of vivid. It's a slightly different state of consciousness, and this would be what we can talk about is when we have dreams in our sleep. It's a different type of consciousness and a different type of quality. It's much more bright and a light type of sleep.
Tene tanda kundi ge tsuk na la ya ti dang ti ma yin ba ze ani do ti dang ti ma yin ba ze te ti ze de kar ze na nam ge kon thon la ti je ni ta de la shan ba la ti ma yin ba ni ze ta nam ge kon thon ze de nga so chen la ko pe na ta ni kun ge nga yin na chi do gu ba ne te dang ane chi do jo pe chi do nga ba tu ba damba ta de ni bar la ya ni que di tso de cha de ore de content la di jani dans tele jambala ti mai ba ta tele jambala ni ko ina ti mai ba la ni ko ora pe na ni mi kon ro ni ko ina ko ni que ti tso re o mar kar de na ni que ge je de la ke dan de go do ani mambi tsamacha zonde na kon ro go ore na kon na pe na to lo 다 미 카시 잡으려 말에 알로 빠르나 아니 큰로니 오래 다미 망치쇼데 아니 알로 빠르잖아 아니 먹으니 나와 소소 시본로 차대요나 니 먹으니 된디요 된디에 손도 아니 님이 contenila 니 그비 티마이 바레제 아니 디나라 르바당 제바데 르바당 제온디 리진 종아 제네 게왈람 반도바 리진 종아 제네 게왈람 반도바 제온디 리진 리아 삼보차네 배나 가서 곰도 든디 제비 갑다 곰드니 무발라 치 샘테치 때 온데 파리시 무바탄 진와 다 샘테서 때모차나 진와 든디 완자 아니 큰로어 마 든디 게알람 바도발 리아 제네 니바 게알람 반도바타 아니 다 게알람 바도바 곰 장도바다 든디 갑사 아니 양 가르제 아니 그나 아니 누구요 말해제 곰 자완도 든디까 단다디 가서 르반 리진 종아 제네 게왈람 반도 바탕제 온데 리진 종아야 상보로다 든디 차네 아니 고 게왈라 바바이나 페나 아니 곤다 하스 마니와이나 조 가르제 조케 가보야란데 르바 상보 차가라 온다 제림보 치데 쳄치 당보 덴디라 마데나 조케알란데 리바 타부 토마도 페나 아네 가토 페차타 예나레 가르 제나 레카 가르 레와이나 리바 상보요 마레 덴디인도 아네 리진 종아야 제비 캅트 아네 마니고아타 아니 그고아다 페케 쳔보레 덴상 체르크 예나야 치토 아네 쳄치네 자니 데니 버르레 야 아니 자니 담보데나 카레나 선바티니 버르라야 아니 아니 그한테 키마테서 나타야 소아당 아니 그나 키마테서 페 네소 테파 Kima leka lea te ngarso te pando tendi shu pento yore zendo tendi indi ko li jonga geala ban gar jene geala bando bata tendi rugbache mrupa ne ti se yin yang zendi ni ka mrupa de ti se yang tsena ko yin yang ane mana ja ka ba ni to zeta ane ko ti cho ran na yang ni ka chi gomro tendi ja ta ngela na je gom ja wa tendi ka sa yin na re gewa chen do ba tendi ko ti cho yin na yang ani pa ka ne ane gewa che gwa ta tendi ge ta mambo chi yo sa re tendi yin song ta ane mrik pa te ti se yin ya ma na ja ka pa ni to ta sang je ge ma ni kha na wa me bi ka ta ane sang je ni kha ka bi ka pe na lam ga do tendi la ro ka de na thela ko na kun ro go ma to ni khu so na ane yang sa la za do wa do ta yang tendi ge kyun mambo yo go ra pe na mo da ta ni thela ko pa ni na ko你可的做才那过来的人那可你可说呢？那拿了门前的忙不这个少了人家一万多，真的人说啥？没有把这第四营养马上就搞把你做的，真的你可以打地做的，真的双人才的，嗯。
Gena kiranti rempa tami rempa roa ki tutute la. Rempa tami rempa tanda ran kiran ki sumbate. Kiran ki goneti yangir son chige tam la moda chembu chi padro sa chi ati gumso.
Allez, là,
Tamate la.
là, re.
Ti
Ah, rigba tang, merigba ze, ani doa. Chidang ani kwe ti tso tila,
oti
ane namje kongta yinba ta chigba che, ti ma yinba, ti le shenbe ni kwa nimi kong la soba kwa ta itila tsa che. Ta rigba ze ondi, li jin jongwa jene gewa lam bando ba ta, tindi ye kapsa ko lolo che ne, ani kena sanyi pe na, ane sanyi, gonda nga se ina sanyi joke ya lande rigba sangbo tang. ane karzaro, rigba sibo ta, tindi yo ala pa.
ti mirik pa te nga ti tamati la nga ti gomas.
This yin yang mana sha kapa yin doze meri pa ze on di ma so ti so tena ko ni ke ti so yin na ko ane moda ta wa do ten di ka bi na ni ku na de ko ma ra na lo la mi sha la mi so la ni ga yo ro yang ja lam ga do ten di la pha do tena ko do di ka ko ni ku so na ma ri ya ta ane kar de ayang la za ta ten di ni ga yo ro ten di yin so ta meri pa ze ate 아니 디초 테나고 예나요 아니 고 델라니카 요 마레 다다 라타 작반도 드니 몽보 요사 갑자 양코 아니 그소나 아니 작바다 그마용아 니가 요라 고 아니 마크와 치네 잡잡 치네 데고 든디 디초라야 상제가 아니 카다 나요 마레 아니 카다 가요레 소니 타레
La so tuji yeah tanda. Okay, so now we're going to look at these other points which are mentioned in the Compendium of Knowledge, which are in relation to the untimely, suitable, and unsuitable. So timely here, in relation to the mental factor of sleep, indicates that the time of sleep for sleep is the middle part of the night. So timely is referring to simply, sleeping, during the middle part of the night. So this might be, for example, if one goes to sleep between 9 and wakes up in the morning around 5, 6, or 7, between that time. So that's a timely time for sleep, basically, as opposed to untimely, which is referring to moments, I guess, in the day which are unsuitable, which are not the right times in this sense to sleep, And the reason for untimely that the daytime is untimely moment to sleep is because one of the causes for sleep which is required is related to darkness. I mean, we can say some people don't really care whether the room is dark or not, they can fall asleep anyway, but as a general consensus we require this cause of darkness to be able to fall asleep. So the brightness of the daylight is actually impedes or is not really a conducive space at that. I guess it's not a conducive time to sleep at that moment. Okay. Then we have this other two dimension of suitable and unsuitable. So suitable here indicates a wish to make an effort in virtue by increasing the energy of the body. So it means that the mental factor of sleep there is an aspect of suitability. And what this means is that, for example, let's say I want to be able to meditate, I want to be able to develop a focus, for example, and sometimes when you develop, you do meditation, you have this sort of mental sort of laxity which can come about, which comes through an intensive sort of practice of meditation. So our attention kind of sinks down, there's a sinking of the mind. So one could actually think, I'm going to sleep in order to be able to restore my body, so I have the energy to engage in these virtuous activities. Yeah. So sleep becomes a moment for rest in order to be able to accomplish virtuous activities. So this is what is meant by suitable. Yeah. There is this underlying wish to engage in virtuous activity, whether it's meditation or whatnot. Because we can think about it, if one goes to bed, if one actually is able to wake up early in the morning, there is a very kind of, there's the morning in the mind in the morning has a quality of being bright and kind of an alertness to it. So it's important to be able to kind of optimize that. But if we go to sleep, in the evening very late, and then we wake up early in the morning, the mind is very kind of cloudy and unclear. So even actually scientists talk about that the period of the night between, 11, 3 o'clock is a very important moment of rest for the liver. Yeah. So it really helps restore the body. There's a very strong restorative capacity, sort of sleep. So therefore, it's important that one optimizes on that. And this is what we're discussing in the sense of suitable. Yeah. And unsuitable is kind of this idea of, there's moments, I guess, where it says unsuitable indicates prohibited or not permitted sleep, even if timely. So this could be, for example, if somebody was a taxi driver at night, and it's true that night is kind of normally dedicated to sleep, and that's a timely moment to sleep. But these people that are driving around on the road, so they need to be very much alert, and they really should not be sleeping, yeah, because they've got people in the back seat, or there's people on the side of the road, so they could put them in danger. So here, although it's normally a correct moment or the right moment to sleep, the person, because of the activity engaging in, is actually it's an unsuitable time to sleep. It could also be in relation guards, which are watching out for, thieves should come about at nighttime. So they have to very much stay alert and not fall asleep in order to be able to stay clear of danger in that sense.
Ni ku kapsa wanshi nand dubar chebareze tanda wanshi de to yo mareze ta te sungu yore yinda ya ngato ni ku kapdu ane chilo ne dra keshik chebo jena ni ya se yon ando ya ndidi lakpa tan ndidi le tu ne ndidi chena lishi rakja rekja nyone ya ani to yon ando ta tendi yore tendi yo sona ane pena data wana chirone ke jauna ko nashi da wanshi de dora nashi mena ane ko kandia ni ya segreze tendigo ane wanshi nal dober cheba zeate wanshi ragba de so dober cheba re mata thamo yoreze tendigo ane yang karzero ta tokyo ze namundo cheba teni chia yoreze ta wanshi nal de ta nin tubo krona 맞아 원시다 참마 매와창도 그래 단다 닌 두번 그소나 맞아 밀림 당아요와 인여고라 밀림 당한테 저 용고 말해 밀림 당한테 간디 값에 용고래잖아 맞아 니 상보 다니 답답하게 오라 가르쳐 오라 니 상보 그위 가들라야 밀림 당한테 용고래 니 두보 그 가드 밀림 요 말해 드니 시바라바 밀림 그 시반도 저 시바라바래 도래 저 시바라바 참마 아니 빠글라 niendo ore ta nalo pa nyuk wangi nalo pa dendo ore ko o deni ye sonza ateni ke ba che yo re
ci san milam ki kapsu shepa rapa kuran so tendi chiki te du kuran ni marwa
no ye shiba ta rakba deni yo re de go ko milam ta ta ma to nin tubo ke ga da to shiba rakba thama 제단이 그 가자 왕시 대초 나로도 아닌 투보 가자 텔레자 이시가 아저 물럼 당알아서 시바야 매와차네 배다 아저 템바토나제 로아 다시바라바 참마 매와차도 그래
라소 Okay, and so now just exploring a little bit further this dimension of the sense consciousnesses drawing inwards at the moment of sleep. So we can, so as I mentioned in this definition, when this mental factor is active, the sense consciousnesses draw inwards, yeah. And so, but this doesn't mean that it's possible that when one is sleeping, if there is a loud noise outside, this can wake the person who's sleeping up. Or for example, if one touches somebody who's asleep through touch and through this contact, the person can be woken up, yeah. But it means here that there is a certain presence of kind of when sleep is occurring, there's different levels of consciousnesses, yeah. And so it's something to be analyzed, to think about what type of consciousnesses are active during the type of coarse consciousnesses, which become non-functional, but there is still subtle consciousness, which is still very much function, means that it can still be sort of reach out to these, to these outwards, for example, sounds or this touch and so forth, yeah. But the moment of deep sleep, there's a period of our sleep which is called deep sleep. There's a real sort of drawing inwards, and at that moment, it is there is no type of dreams in the mind. So really, the coarse consciousnesses are completely sort of inactive, 100% active, and then we have the dream time, or the moment in the night when there's dreams which occur. And this type of sleep is more like, we can think about it as a clear sleep, a light sleep, yeah. And it's at this time actually the coarse consciousnesses are actually functional to a certain degree, yeah. They require actually a certain active level of consciousness, which is not present during deep sleep. Deep sleep is almost like we have this experience, it's almost like we're completely sort of passed out, yeah. It's almost like we fainted in a sense. And this is actually very different, because during deep sleep, we can say that the subtle sort of consciousnesses are becoming, and themselves are dormant in a sense. Actually, during the dreams, we have the coarse and a certain level of coarse consciousness, which is actually active at that moment.
Tene ta nye ku korte tene chin sara cheta nye la shiba thara ta nga ta ani ndo shoko te mandawa te mambo yore te na ta te jimor go chirwa tene ta ni ba de jangir jega nga ni ba de ani gyoba ze ya tere gyoba ze ya te nga so jawar rongwa ta mrongwa kan yang kar de kan rong reng samba am jangi jet chigba la tene mando jende yela chape senjong chilaya ani gyoba azego ta jawa kare leka ronwa chi nare leka mronwa chi nare ani tini kanron samba am de soso samba am ani janje wangmet chechuba tiri kando la tene tiri kanron chi la tene mando jende yela chape senjong chilaya ani gyoba la wore gyoba zeondi yur kare jawa ronwa ta mronwa yena soso cheba ma yena jang che de chigba kanron chi mendo jend soso yela chapi simjong chila ya la ore de te kar la ore de na perna jawa perna ane kora ta gevi chawan ro na kora ta ane chang tha la so ba soso jen dogu yo na de trobo janda chi tin ro ne da kora korjo mare chang tha jo mare jora kara nga ra ni ba ro ne ne zakhan lan ro chang thong lo de ya ro tendi ya ina ko semla kare de na kora kor do ko ra ane kora kor do ko re de na ku trobo ti chakhan la chun ro ne ko ane kora ta chang thya la so ba ra o mara teni mara so to ko semla ya kare tengo re de na tan jopach ta pesa son tri ane kora ta ane chang thya te so ra ma son ane samne semla jopach yela chakpa de na semla ane nazik tama so na matewa chi chane ane gyoddewa ta ko gyoba tendi chila ya semjo tendi chila ya gyoba zewa ta magewa shola la ina perna mi chi ge sok cho che chuai na so sok chondo me na perna jadin ro chi ge ke tab chuai na ko ke tab tsati ko semla gyoba shu che akha dan ma so nyam ba ge tendi logic semla rangshik she ngora o tendi tela ya ane gyoba tala ya karde semjong jila ya gyoba la wore jawa rongwa ta marongwa yena rang cheba yena ane jangi che de chiba o tendi kan rong chi che yondi jawa de che yondi so so semla ma dewa che semla aka ndrig ma so nyamba o tendi jila ya ane gyoba la wore
And so that is all we're going to say in relation to the mental factor of sleep. There are sort of explanations in other literature, but I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. And now we can look at the second variable mental factor, which is regret. And so the definition here reads, it is a mental factor that is a mental repentance of suitable or unsuitable actions done according to either one's own intention or others' insistence. Yeah. So regret, there are these sort of different sort of dimensions to reflect upon. Yeah. So regret can either be suitable, it can be unsuitable, it can be done in relation to one's own actions, or it can be done in relation to others' actions. Okay? And so when we think about an action, let's say, for example, I have the wish to go to do a kora or to do some prostrations, and I'm kind of on my way to do that, and then I meet a friend and they say, oh no, don't do that, you know, let's go to the have some tea, or let's go out to the restaurant, let's have some food together. So here, the person, I'm dragged along by this friend to go and do these other things, and although I have this wish to do these practices, the kora or the prostrations, I actually think afterwards, oh, that's a shame, I really wasn't able to do it, and one feels regretful, one feels sort of kind of upset about not being able to have accomplished what wanted these actions, these virtuous action that one aspired to do. So regret can also be not only in relation to one's actions, it can be in relation to others people's actions. Yeah, so it could be if somebody else in front of us kills or chops off the head of some kind of creature before us, we can really think, oh dear, and feel sort of regret by upon seeing such an action. So the kind of key point to understand about regret is that there is a suitable, unsuitable regret, and then it's in relation to either oneself or other. But it's kind of fundamentally referring to the state of mind when one thinks like, that is really not quite right. That is really not, that is not okay. And this is kind of, this sort of state of mind, which sort of mental factor that regret actually is.
Tadani yoba de la ya, ane kundig na la ya yang, ane gewatan, ma gewatan, lomatan, ane sungat yoba son yores. Dea gewa karezena, ma gewa chola yoba chena, gewatan, gewi chola yoba chena, ma gewa chandore. Tene taat jawa, ane parwa, gewatan, ma gewa kanya mayimba, tendi la ya yoba chewa yena, ane lomaten chandore. 다 gewi chola gyoba chena magewa kandi chare dena pena gewa droba da ane gomja ndo da yana chang tharwa ta nga zo de to yana peja tawa peja lo gyong cha de chola ane pe sa song nge ti so chola shu ta song sa ne gyoba che yana te magewa cha do re gewi chone do ne magewa cha do re pena gomja ne chito ane chekando chito chingro tendi de ba yana te gomne ala ta te 아까 내 뒤쪽으로 돌아다 송아 저도 직접 돌아다 배사 송님네 요바 제와이나 때 먹게와 차도 그래. 요발 먹게와 용탄터에 다 거르데 먹게위 초란 요바 제와이나 아니 게와 차도 그래. 배나 속초 발라서 바다. 얘나 그마 제와다. 든딜라 아니 요바 제네 배사 송 그마 제와데 누마 송아님비 요바 제야체. 아니 속초아데 닝제 셈첸데 오늘 장에 샤타버에 도와 아니 게 소초야 된 마송아 냠비 요바키야이나 아니 데 게와차도 베스 다다도 총관하는 도네 아니 둘로도 뉴아도 제 페나 함고지 뉴아이나 함고도 뉴네 체온데 게 깜발라 데보레문도 페사송 다 마뉴나 타타야 냠네 요바키야이나 te gewa ta magya ka chako mare loma ta chako re teni sonta yoba ngo girbi ane gewa re magya re loma te samga yo re
And so here, what I want to explore now in relation to regret is its kind of changeable, its variable nature. So regret, if we regret a non-virtuous action, this means that we are generating we generate actually a virtuous state of mind, a virtuous regret. We can also regret a virtuous action, and then it becomes, we actually develop non-virtue. And we can also regret neutral actions, which actually, bring about more neutrality in a sense. So let me give you an example of regretting a virtuous action and how it brings about non-virtue. So let's say I regret a virtuous action. It could be, I regret meditating, I regret spending time doing prostrations, I regret spending time studying. And it basically means, let's say, you actions, you meditate or you prostrate or you study and you think, oh, wow, what a waste of time. I shouldn't have never done that. I spent, all this time doing this, and, it's just really, it's just such a waste of time. So this sort of reflection means that you're transforming a virtuous action into a non-virtuous one. Yeah, you can think like, oh, I've been meditating for half an hour and that was just a total waste of time. So this means that you're feeling a kind of sense of regret in relation to this virtuous actions you've committed, and this regret in relation to a virtuous action actually brings about non-virtue. Okay, then we can think about regret for non-virtuous action and how this brings about virtue. Yeah. So this will be, for example, killing or stealing. And it could be like, I feel really bad, actually. I really regret, having stolen this, these various things, and I feel really bad for having killed this creature or this being, this sentient being, and poor them, and feeling kind of compassion for the action that one has done and the killing that one has committed, and one sincerely feels kind of a repentance and kind of an unease in relation to one action, to the action which one has committed. And so this is an example of regretting non-virtuous actions and then becoming virtuous. Yeah. And then we have neutral actions and regretting neutral actions. So this could be, for example, we go into a shop and we decide we're going to buy some shoes, or we're going to buy, various types of things. So we buy these shoes, let's say, and then we go home and we put them on and we think, oh no, these are really not comfortable. I shouldn't have gotten those. And so we're feeling regretful that we bought these shoes because, they actually don't fit us properly or whatnot. And so this is really kind of from a neutral action of buying shoes, we're just bringing about, it's a kind of neutral type of regret. In a sense. So here, I think these examples illustrate to you how the changeable or the variable nature of this mental factor of regret.
Tuesday on the so Yoba Tite, Karazan Magewala Yobayena, Gewachandora, co teacher T red or red. Tana Ribare or the Magewala and Yona, Ribare or Tian Chate or red. Ta Gewal and Yoba in Sona, Timai Bachoro, Cochinjal or Dora, Muna Gevache, Kicheva, Tatan Ridora, Ina, Tel and Yobakia, Timai Bata, Maripare or red. Tendi sonta ane tanda yobakia te pena yobakia te magewala yobakia te ngato dibasha top ji ora dibasha top ji ane tabito ta ane tenji top ta number sanjimi top de nimbuto de tanda nimbuto ji number sanjimi to number sanjimito zeda ngarchiga dugba la ane nyoba kya tare ngarchiga dugba soso ngola chi thaega dugba tala nyoba shik tapo kene ngaso dung thong thawa yana dung thong ye mede dung thong tala nyoba shu chegra nga tanda dung thong so da ko chia sola pap de odi ko ngar dung thong tala nyoba shu kya nangjin Matsu Mula Sasha Dibati to Susu Yella Tani Yobashi Tapo Kiena, the number Sanjibi Stobs, Dibasha Pa Shaya Laya, Hachang Pendo Chimbore, the Teen Sonda, Nato Mane Magewal and Yobakiate, Gewal and Juviatan, Gewa Druvia, Gen Terin Duatan, 아니 텐들라 하장 펜도 쳔보레 다나가 좀 먹게와라 교용디 먹게와라 페나 소 제반도 따위나 소치 제 소소 삼신의 제반 양나 현지 아니 쿠르마치네 제치바 텐디지라 소소 슈운 조 파티아당 페나 등통하는 낭신 아니 요바키아이나 진짜 아니 그 소문자 담자 템보용 거래 진짜 소라밥장 먹게레즈 텐디나제 진짜 소라바와이나야 코 소제아 텐디고 아니 맞제 녀비 담자 템보용 거래 텐디인 손자 먹게와는 요바키네 게와라야 주바데 하정거 아니 개첨보레즈 드바샤왈 하정거 아니 스톱 첨보 텐디레즈 음
Mm. And so now, similarly, in the Compendium of Knowledge, it says that what is regret associated with delusion? It is a mental repentance of intended or unintended actions that are virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral, timely, untimely, suitable, or unsuitable. And it functions to hinder stability of the mind. So here, just like sleep, we have this dimension of timely, untimely, suitable, or unsuitable. So to start to explore this, what this actually means, so timely, it means actually feeling regret in relation to non-virtuous actions that one has committed, yeah. So bad about negative actions that we've done actually is brings about sort of virtue, and not only is this timely, this is also suitable. It is completely suitable to regret negative actions that one has committed. On the other hand, if one regrets virtue, this is what we will understand as unsuitable, yeah. And we have to think about, for example, the practice of regret actually in relation to the four opponent forces when one is purifying negativity. So the four opponent forces are refuge, regret, recitation, and restraint. Yeah. So these four opponent forces, especially here, the dimension of regret is very important because one is contemplating all of one's past actions and negative actions that one has committed and considering them just like one has drinking poison. And as soon as, if we became aware that we had drunk poison, we would immediately hit the panic button. And, because it's an attack on one's life, we immediately would feel great regret for having committed such an action and want to find a solution to sort of save ourselves from this situation. And so it is very sort of useful, the power of regret, because we are sort of contemplating non-virtuous actions, and through this contemplation of regret in relation to these, we generate virtuous states of mind. And this not only, it helps us also in the future to push us to engage into virtuous actions. So, for example, if we think about, regretting a non-virtuous action of killing, whether it's oneself that we've committed or, we've pushed others and incited somebody else to commit this act of killing, if we have this sincere sense of regret and we consider this action just like it's a poison, like we want to rid ourselves of it as quickly as possible, the stronger our regret, this means that the stronger our promise to not commit this negative action in the future will be in our minds, because we will see that even at the cost, and even if our life is at stake, we will be able to sort of we've made such a strong promise to ourselves that we will not engage in that non-virtuous action again. So here I think this example, it kind of illustrates this dimension of the powerful sense of regret and how this pushes us to engage, and it actually becomes the basis to engage in virtuous actions in the future.
Then Yoba Korangi Ngotla Game Loma Tastamga Yoche. Tenek Tanda Kuntu Nalama Songa Jivja Chena, Yoba Tamugi Charto Barez, Tamugi Charto in Zeate, and Yoba Magewa, Geval and Jone Magewa Chandua, so Tersungores. Tenin Sonda Koranga. Ane jelete sem nebi pardak chubi legend red sem tembo ne ala pardak chuba ane parche chenye jele chen red de sem tembo ne ala pardak chotang kare red na ane pe na yoba che onde gewalan yoba inare magewalan yoba inare kare na sem se chida ne bala ne to mar ko sem sam rochi Magewala Yone Gewa Chenayang, Ane Semsam Rochi Yode or Taco Magewa Chat and Rimaswa Yamba. Ane Gewala Yone Magewa Ina, Telejanko Numon Rochi, Tango Chagdo Wara, the Indi, Ane Sem Nebala Parda Chochered. Chetan Gewala Yone Yoba Kewate, Ane Magewa Chakbatan, Magewa Chakba Maza. Dene lokta la soba kiwi jian ro reze. Pe na tambo nang chu che, nang chu na la gum nyam drab tang tendi te so la ko ting zabo da ya bo ma she che, ta te ti so chola tang song nyam ba do tang. Yena te che da nge ngama che ja ndu ma song nyam ne, ane te lan yoba che on di, ta ngama nang chu na la song ja te so la ya, ane yoba che on wo re. Yoba che kar de che te 디소 라서바 톨라당하다 텐디치야 텔란 요바치옹 텐디치옹디 아니 타낭추 나로 송샤 그레 김제타 콘초라서발라이 마키파타 마타파 록타라서바 키위 텐디 송타 게발란 요네 마게와 차 요바테 록타라서바타 레 김제타 텐디레 크로안데 이 크르데블라서비 아니 기안드로이 아니 하정 인가 첨보도 단 조바 개발한 요네 마게와 차ate 조바 첨보도 된디 차가 요레즈
And also in this compendium of knowledge, it explains that regret has these three. It can be of three types. It can be virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. Also, in this definition of the compendium of knowledge, it talks about regret being part or associated with ignorance. Yeah, here this is actually when it's stated here that it's part of ignorance, he's talking particularly here about the author about regretting virtuous actions. Regretting virtuous actions is associated with ignorance. Yeah. And as for its function, the function of regret, it functions to hinder the stability of the mind. And so this means that regret prevents any sort of a stableness or firmness of the mind. And how does this work? Is that whether we are regretting a virtuous action or a non-virtuous action, we'll notice that our mind is very unable to stay still at that moment. There is a sort of kind of you could say some type of cry out or a lack of sort of balance in the mind when one is feeling regret. And particularly, we can say that it's associated with sort of ignorance in the sense when one is regretting a virtuous action, because the disturbing emotions at that time are very much active. Yeah, we're particularly the mind is particularly unstable if we're regretting a virtuous action in that sense. And we can think, for example, that it functions not only to hinder the stability of the mind, but it also functions to bring about attachment and wrong views and so forth. Like, for example, somebody has spent some time studying Buddhism, but actually they haven't studied it in great depth, and they have developed some kind of misunderstanding and actually been a bit jaded with the whole thing. They decide that all this time studying Buddhism has been such a waste of time. It's really, there's nothing useful here or no good here for me to take. And one starts to feel regret in relation to having studied the Dharma and starts to sort of reject it in sense. And so such a person might also end up sort of criticizing and sort of criticizing, rejecting the laws of cause and effect and so forth. And this becomes very dangerous in the sense that it will bring about more negative actions. There is a great sort of danger in the sense of regretting virtuous actions.
Tene yoba tanda janger tanda ganga anya tang chikbare kerlong go wangi ane kun yoba ke gewe cholan yoba ina magewa ta magewi cholan yoba ina gewa ta loma talan yoba ina ane loma ta kerlong wang tene kerlong wangi tene ke ondi teso da nyam da trok semjong janda teso gewa ina gewi tapa tang damba tang ane karde gewa chakchi yora teso sondan do ta magewa ina ngotsa me pa ta the me pa la so pa 좋아도 근데 대조 냠다 손던 돈도 손던 거니 jan gen도 대조 찍바데 해제 대치 되잖아.
And so, lastly, it's important to understand that regret is very much this variable dimension of regret is once again the same as sleep. It's in relation to one's motivation. So, if one has a virtuous motivation when one feels regret, then the regret which follows will be virtuous, and then there's if under the power of a non-virtuous sort of state of mind, one feels regret, then again that will mean that regret is negative, is non-virtuous. And then if there is no particular sort of, it's a neutral motivation, then again that means that the regret itself will be sort of neutral. A variable nature of the mental factor of regret is also impacted by what mental factors are at work at the time in our mind. So depending on what other mental factors regret is associated with, for example, if it's associated with one of the 11 virtuous mental factors, then that will make the regret virtuous. Or if it's associated with the 20, for example, secondary afflictions, then that will mean that the regret will be non-virtuous. So there's these kind of effect and kind of compatibility you can see between sort of regret and the other mental factors which we've studied.
Tokyo ni se chiwi tokpa tang zi. Sembam sherab la tenne ye la jebte chene kyubi semjong jila ya, ane kyoban jokore zi. Ta Tokyo ni zi ondi, tokpa ta kyoba. Tokpa zi ondi, nga tso shiba de yer la pa nji ondi, ane yurti, ane namba rakpa tsam, sornye. Pena gawan rochi la, ane zimbi shiba. Maso Tokyo ni de wangshi de zo korla yore, ane yishi korla yore. Sem tsamba ane namba shiba, ane ngagan korla jogore. Ten sonde kawan zimbi mushi re yena, kawan zimbi mushi tiga, ane kawaga namba rakpa tsam shiba. Pena yemro ta tendi jeb thapo ma chia chia, namba rakpa tsam shinye de la ya, tokpa la wore. Tene pa jeb thapo gawa yeb tang, gawa kato tang, ane gawa ring tong tang, ta tendi jeb thapo shinye de la ya, kyoba la wores. Tendi yin sonza, ane toto kyo tang sang ting jeb nyet zene, tanda ngomba nzoga na la lobo yinyi, toto kyo tang ting jeb zeonde nga zo, ane rakpan rochi. Rakpan rochi, ane yela chenye de la, ting ze, jeb zede, jeb thapo gone. O, karze, yurte yela chenye de, ane kyoba ze gore. Teni yin sonzang, ko sem chigun korla ya, ane niga yo cho gore.
Semchikla, kare yult, semchikla tetso kare semjung ni.
Sem chigun korla ya, korla sem chigun korla sem jong ramada mombo yorwa. Tena je, toba da kyoba niga, sem chigun korla ya, yon cho gore.
Lasso. Ok, tso semchikla tetso ni tende yong chogurwa.
Re.
Lasso. Okay. And so now the third and fourth variable mental factor are inquiry and analysis. So inquiry and analysis are stated to be within the twofold categorization of inquiry and analysis. Inquiry is a mental factor that, in dependence on intention or wisdom, examines any object in a rough manner. And analysis is a mental factor that, in dependence on intention or wisdom, analyzes its object finely. So here we can see that the difference which is stated between inquiry and analysis is the way that they're engaging with the object. So we have inquiry, which is examining the in a right, in a kind of on the course level, you could say. for example. And on the other hand, we have analysis, which analyzes, which studies the object finely in its detail. Yeah. So here it's both of these are relating to one sense. They can be to our sense consciousness as well as our mentalness. Yeah. So for example, if we're perceiving like a pillar, one would say that inquiry is very sort of a rough analysis of the pillar for us, with some, very, very sort of immediate kind of understanding or evaluation of the pillar before us. And on the other hand, analysis is a much deeper level sort of understand, comprehension of the pillar which is before us. So this could be more, in relation to details about the shape, details about the quality, and so forth. So it's a kind of taking it a step further. And so one thing to kind of bear in mind as well is that in relation to one main mind, we have a main mind. The main mind can be accompanied by both. It can be accompanied by both the mental factor of inquiry as well as analysis. So one main mind can have both of these variable mental factors, inquiry and analysis, together at the same, working at the same time.
Tene tanda Tokyo ni sem chicken korleya yon chowa pedala kare jedamawa kare shawore zena pena Mario ra Marte nato nima sayona ko jelo ane chugna chitamo na la jana bedere ane koyang pan thabo changdo ro o tin tindi na karda tindi sonta ane nyuma shari kaptu chugna la marja na sheret mar da chang labo ma chak nyuma je ma to ha chang thabo ro chak mare tena je sem chigun korla ya ane koran ta tang chane jele chane ane chikte yurla pa rapir na batos pena michik domba thonyo na ko donde o dri do chire nya batos tela ane stokpa tang ane domba ti to kato ta yeb tang ko domba la kare chundo mundu kare man ro yo na kare yo mon baton ro yo na kare yo tindi jab sapo pa shi denye pena mushi chik pa ta de kaptila tini ni cha yungo re tindi shi denye de la ane kyoba de gore tindi sonda tanda jerama ye pete dan pe sambo ro yo re mar sarba chi chugna la hajang karde nima ga hajang troa ma yimba chega hajang cha ma yimba ko so debo chi de dondi ane sem chigu gol tindi ni cha ane njik to re de ta de Tokyo ni yo de pena kyoban ro ma to sem chigu gol me ayena rakpad ma to shito marwa ane mare topa ma to me ayena rakpa ma to shito mara kyoba ma to me ayena yang ane jeb thapo chi ma do de shide ma to rakpa na ba tea de shito mare teni ma to te sem chigu gol ni ga yo sona ane karde chelo ko na ba la to ba rakpa te da ane de la tembe chi yang yeb da ka to la to ba jeb thabo she ni cha yung gore teni so da ane sem chigu gol ni cha yung gore de ta sem chigu gol ni cha yung go mare de ne so ba jani ane teni mambo yo re ina teni yung gore de pela teni ja yo re
Gena ngati pertigi marti shuya tingti gotsuma sonti dandawa te yanger sunruna te perti nima nang la shana ni shu dogre ani changlo yang dimna nang la shashana ani chapo chagre ti tang toba tang chubache ate dandawa
oh ten devate pena ane Marte chutamo haja tamo nima mashar sa jana chapo changro ro ane
la
ma nima tsa chu na la ma jana nima thabo gala jana mar juro ro te mai ba je ta chu na la ja nima shar de da jana Marte je go na karena le la bo ro ji ko pe jo ta te yorwa te na je tanda topa da kyoba nicha sem chigu korlo yo ayena ko rakpa te ang shigre ane jeb thabo da nicha shito re pena ane topa ma to me ayena ane jeb thabo shia ku kato la soba da yeb da de namba chabar karena te do thama 아니 시토 말이지 지바드 카르데 지바드 메나
La
도바
sota,
교바드 메나 집사보 시토 말이지 어떤이
la sota.
에돈로 따다래서
Oh, tataresan, tuchinangena, tuchina. And so there is an example which is presented by the Vaibhashika in relation to inquiry and analysis to kind of illustrate the kind of how they both need to be at work at the same time in order to be able to gain a kind of holistic or a right understanding of the situation. And so the example which is given is in relation to butter. So put a clump of butter in this, it will completely sort of become very, very melty and kind of turn into a puddle. And on the other hand, if we take a clump of butter and we put it in cold water, it will be very, 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 very hard. Yeah. So here, if we're able to take a butter and we leave it, we're not putting it in the sunlight and we're not putting it in freezing cold water. We put it just at room temperature. We're actually able to slice through the butter and use it, in the way that we need to, in a sense. So, this idea actually illustrates the importance, basically, of having both inquiry and analysis at work together, in the mind, because if we put it in the sun, basically, the butter, you'll be able to cut through it completely, because it will be a complete puddle, but you will have no notion of the roughness of the kind of the initial sort of rough aspect of what the butter is. You will just have this kind of, this sort of puddle before you. On the other, if you have this clump of butter, which is very, very hard, there's no way you're actually able to cut into it and to find out about the fine detail of it. You're only stuck with this very coarse, rough notion of what butter actually is. So by keeping butter at room temperature, you're able not only to have an idea of the rough details of the rough sort of shape and what it actually is, butter. And then you're also able to slice through it and see what's inside and so forth. So here, this example actually aims to illustrate the association and, according to the Vaibhashika, the necessity of having inquiry and analysis at work together with one main mind. Because, for example, you can remember that inquiry actually understands things in a rough manner. So, for example, if I see somebody in the street and I see their face and I kind of vaguely am able to recognize, so I have a sort of capacity for recognition, but, maybe this person has a scratch on their face or some kind of, wound, then the mind will be like, oh, I wonder what that's about. I wonder what's happened. So here there's a much more sort of elaborate sort of analysis of what is before us. So it is important to be able to gain a holistic or a kind of deep understanding of what the situation actually is. One needs both. One needs the inquiry level, which looks at the roughness of something, and then the analysis to understand the fine detail of it.
Tokyo ni te nga tso doba tang samta tangbo la yo re ze to tene ya gang la ya samta ni pa samba che zime te tso la ya Tokyo ni yo ma re ze Tokyo ni ze te shiba ye la yo wi rangjen son tang jerne samta ni ba yan cho la ya samta shiba tang te tso la ya tokba te samta tangbo la ma to yo ma re ne samta samba jibane kyobanya yo mare ko tate pache malam
Ale, kiranti yang suruti ke se kare tes kaso kiranti ki samten ki kola sungdo la samten sam yang surunan ko
Tokyo ni yorwa
lao
toba
lao
toba ni te toba te doba ne samta tambo parile yores kyobate samta samba parile yores samta jibane toba da kyoba niga yo mares kita samta jiba kyong na la ya yala ka kyong na la ya Tokyo ni yores kyong re te ores ko ti ngor samta jibi ngor chibi toba da kyoba yo mares sem rakpa res tendi sonda koni ni cha sem rakpa res tendi sonda samta jibala ya yo mares doba ne ta samta samba manchora tela Tokyo karza kyoba ta toba samta tambo parti yores
laso And if we sort of explore these two, inquiry and analysis, in the context of meditation, we have these different levels of meditation, and sort of the desire level meditation, which leads up to the first concentration, the second, the third, and so forth. And so up until from the first concentration to the third one, inquiry and analysis are both present. From the third concentration, there is still analysis, but after fourth concentration, there is no longer any analysis. Yeah. So just to repeat that, on the first level of concentration, we have both inquiry and analysis. And then up until the third concentration, we only have analysis left, yeah, that mental factor functioning. And so this means that from the fourth concentration onwards, there is no longer inquiry nor analysis, okay?
다 똑바다 교반이가 아니 ngorkebi yang gewata magewata lomanda xtumga yorede te yortan kandirezena pena magewi semchendo sego yona semchenti ani pa sendo ko kene lone tindi semchendi kato tan ta semche ki na ba zamsharwala pena lundo seyina ko luk ki na ba do shanye tatan ani tela kyoba chenye tela ani stokbache dan I luk ani kato ta yebtan chejong ani tendi thama jiptabo junye tela ya ani kyoba la ore de tendi sonda ko magewa chade ore kare kerlongo semche sondo ko pi yela jigo ore ta je gewa ina pena hakro jia ina hakgo ani karde ki namba do shayena ko toba chade ore ya hak jan ya maya ta ya hak ju jian dang ani neli wa ta thama jiptabo ta de tendi la ya ani kerlon taba deba ta ani gewi kene lone ani trita de ni jiptabo kyo de ni kyoba chakore ze tendi sonda ko ani gewa chate ore ze toba da kyoba ta loma ta ta da chala parwan ro ta songwana la to chala nyon ro di ta da chala chu ya po ta ya po mai ba tendi chabar chede ro toba da kyoba te tola ani loma ten chakore no so samga yo ta ku ngor ki be geso samga yo ta tendi re
And so now let's explore how these two, inquiry and analysis, actually have a variable quality to them. Yeah, they have a variable nature to them. And so we can think, for example, that inquiry and analysis can be non-virtuous. For example, if one decides that they, has the motivation to kill, for example, a sheep, let's say. So one will, the person, who's going to kill this sheep will see the sheep from afar and, kind of have some kind of a level of inquiry in order to sort of have a rough idea of what this sheep is, what it looks like, and so forth. And there's going to be this next step of analysis of that sheep, and find, sort of, assess the size of it and kind of go into greater detail as regards this analysis. So here, because of the motivation to kill, this activity of inquiry and analysis becomes non-virtuous. And then we have the virtuous mental factor of inquiry and analysis. And this could be, for example, coming into contact with a holy object. So first of all, when we see, for example, a statue or a holy object, we will have an initial sort of rough inquiry of what that object is. And then secondly, we will go a bit further and analyze this object before us, this holy object, think more about the materials and so forth. And so this is once again associating inquiry and analysis in relation to a virtuous sort of motivation to come into contact with this holy object and so forth. And then we can also have a neutral inquiry or neutral analysis, which will be in relation to a very kind of neutral, or in a sense a mundane type of object. And this, we do a lot of this when we go into shops and we think about you get a rough understanding of what we're going to buy, and then we analyze it a little bit further, and we make all this. We have these two mental factors of inquiry and analysis at work in relation to this sort of neutral type of object with a and so this is how we can have these three virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral inquiry and analysis.
Tendi yin song tang, ane tanda kerlong gi tob gi ko gewa tang ma gewa longma ta samga yue so da pe na moda chi tang ye na moda khalwa na yin de kerlong de cha to wores kerlong sem gewi cholan do na ane pe na moda lamga ya bol tang do na ya bor wa ya lamga ni ma ya bo ma tang ya sa lan chong do na je ma ge chol ju do na ya sa na je re te wores Ganza de maza nyarwatan ane ganza de dungur kiwata kangar yosa tenila maza do re de kerlong de dukja yin sota kerlong ane tenicha kerlong gewatan ane kerlong zambo tendi yin sona moda lamga la tata ta moda tani ti moda lamga tata ta ne gawa leb go na tagaran te leb do re te na shere de moda khalwa na shere tendi sonza kunti na la rapper nepa tam rapper mane pe ten che bar somba na ane de sola ane ge so samga yupi dupchele ko re de kare de na ane to tyo ni jin de ye to wa che bar che ba dewa rapper ne bar che na ane ge wi cho do re ane ma ge cho so chirbi to tyo ni jin de ye to mo wa ane tendi che bar che be chane ane ko rapper mane pa re tendi so da kenti no la ya Ani repa nepa tama nepa zayate driva yetta uwa tela repa nepa che yetta moa tela karze repa ma nepa che te son yo res tanda tayi kerlungu tubjin rostan de tama chikba re ani moda khalwa na je re kerlung de yagbon do na mando la ko tsang sim tama ti tanda de zo tokyo tanda zo tama ti ani wan do ne khalo jer ne do te wo res
And so now, if we think about how inquiry and analysis are presented in the Compendium of Knowledge, it says, what is inquiry based on intentional wisdom? It is a deeply searching mental discourse. It is a coarse aspect of the mind. What is analysis based on intentional wisdom? Is a finely investigating mental discourse. It is a refined aspect of the mind. They both function as a support for pleasant or unpleasant states. And so here, what I want to sort of think about is the relation that it has with motivation. When we think about our inquiry and our analysis and how it becomes virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. So we really need to think about the motivation, how that will direct our intention and sort of direct the quality of the action in a virtuous or non-virtuous or neutral sort of direction or state. So you can think of motivation as just being like somebody who drives a driver, a pilot, or somebody who drives a car or something. So the driver is really directing, the car in a particular direction. Let's say you've got a good driver, let's say you've got the driver might drive off the side of a cliff, and they might come into an accident, and it will bring about sort of many types of problems and suffering. So this would result from a bad driver, which is here we're really meaning a bad motivation, a negative motivation. On the other hand, if you have a good driver, then the good driver will be able to go along the road and sway throughout the different paths, and without any falling into any great danger, and you'll arrive exactly where you want to arrive. So this good driver is actually a metaphor for the good motivation, the wholesome motivation. And so you can think about how the motivation, they both support, here it says in the definition, for pleasant and unpleasant states. So it's really the motivation which is directing the mind, and therefore directing the mind towards a pleasant state, which means basically a wholesome or productive sort of states of mind, or happy states of mind, and unpleasant states, which are, experiences which are, displeasing, or various types of suffering. So the direction, basically, or that intention, or the direction that inquiry or analysis actually takes is heavily dependent on what type of motivation one has, and it will drive inquiry or analysis in different directions. And because it drives you in a different directions, it'll be a support for both pleasant or unpleasant states.
다 던디 손도 대연초 그 아니 샘종들라 아니 근딜 송안나지 샘종다 납정 악치 요래 납정 악치 고테 나지 로봇토메 그 근딜 송요래다 로봇토메 그 종잔다 아니 난저 규비사 대존나야 샘종 드나지 아니 납정 악치 송요래 기타 샘종들 먼저 쳤다라 아니 먼저 망보 요래 단다 아니 졸레시야 샘종 j'ai tout yore ane juste tanzale chonwaze yang semjong yore ane karde o gobolo do pombo nge rapche za te so na semjong ta semjong mandawa sonsa mambo yore yina yongta ta zo de ze gorote tanda jebja che sa de tanda di gunti no so semjong apche ngachibo te na breze
And so here, just like I mentioned before, the changeable or the variable nature of these last four mental factors, they're always in relation to the motivation, depending upon the motivation which underlies, which kind of animates or propels these mental factors. It also has to do with what these variable or these changeable mental factors they're associated with. What type of other mental factors are they collaborating, or you could say, or working along with while they are active within the mind? And so here what we have studied are the 51 mental factors, and this presentation is composed by Asanga, and there are other texts which he has composed, for example, on the level of the yogic deeds, and which present these mental afflictions. There is also a text by Vasubandhu, which is a treatise on the 5 aggregates, which discuss the mental factors. And there are also treatises composed by Nagarjuna and so forth. And so you'll find in all these different literatures slightly different presentations of these mental factors, but here we've been focusing on the compendium of knowledge and this sort of presentation of these mental factors.
Lola so tendi yin so da gang le xie sha simjong de zeng ge wang de chen de zhu ane yirngi nga tang kar de gendo nga tang yirngi nga tang ge wa chak chi da san yun zhu tang nian yun ni shi zhen ji xie de zhu yo re da zhu bo de nga so ane de so jiang ne de so shi ne nga so la kar pen to yo re na pe na gendo nga chi yirngi nga chi 대초 안에 근로가তে 셈 소로한듯이 셈바 열라치다 레바 나트레오 레데오라 대인존디 셈그 콜레야 소로아칸디도 안에 딘디시그피 소로아 데드카린도 딘디시그피 다만다 체야 요란디신 참만자마 참만다만다 대초 남자 학고아다 딘이 영잉아제데 열체타파 딘디그 란지온디 셈조 카레카레 아니 지근도 대체 아니 개와 척치 시온데 가서 개와 척치라 개와 대초 아니 소소 줄라 끼와이나 소소라 요바이나 아니 셈라 펜토 카런도 주보 데드 카르체근도 대온디 셈페 로본도다 아니 빡페본도 들리차가 오래 들리인도나 개와 척치가 남자 신에 개와 척치 야 콤페르타 야지 땅아 어때 지당 아니 디오라야 ngato sem maron acheni sem maje acheni maske bazoni tanyo tuta nyenyu nishe tesore teso soso kanikandi ya hako sona pena data ma sona dan de dan de ya hako sona jima tozon che ata kare che ayina soso pento shu yorwa tendi yende sem karga maske bachendo karga soso ane pa randa jeni soso chene pena chadang ni doena ranje soso pa chendo ore riz chendo dindiche donde range soso chena ane ngato tersan kori royena tsama panza chigla tene de ore chigla tene de ore soso tinala ten chigla ten me nyambe ane chinchelo dan zene ane drachia tseachia teso tama tendi wanga yungore tendi yongson wanga yungu yoson da teso ngo yabo zan sona tendi chia la tambo ne meba zo to mare kale kuso mango mari tawa nyumo teso go mari tawa nyumo teso kale ma nyam chongri tawa kale ane nyumo teso suso gila mungo marcheba teziri pento yores tendi sonda semjongo tang semjongo rostan de yabo ha ko sona ngaso dad ma sona parupo la pa da yabgo yo na parupo dati ne standa dati le kapte da stopshi chejong tama ha ko sona ma jaon de ma japtan de so mandawa tele tembi charge tan godu te zo che chogora te na je cha de ore de teni yin zonta pu karte ngaso nyumo so karte cha gosata nyumo te sore nyumo sta nyu tri da nyu ni she yarje tan goate ane gewa chachik te sore te so ane shiala pento yoreze ane te pache zondo e sare ta tandi semjong korko lobsen de ane kap te zondo undu.
So up until now, and this, I guess now this talk or this lecture concludes these classes on the mind and the mental factors. And so up until now, what we've seen, just to kind of sum it up a little bit, we study the 5 omnipresent factors, the 5 determining factors, the 11 virtuous factors, the 6 root afflictions, the 20 secondary afflictions, and the 4 changeable factors. And these are the 51 mental factors. Yeah. And so first of all, we, the question, I guess, which comes about is how, or what is the use of engaging in such a study of the 51 mental factors? And so, for example, if we're able to reflect, let's say, on the 5 omnipresent factors and the 5 determining factors, let's say feeling, discrimination, intention, mental engagement and contact, and so forth. So if one is able actually to think about when one engages in an action, what type of feeling one is experiencing, like basically what is happening inside your mind, understanding how discrimination is active at that point, reflect upon how our intention is affecting our action and kind of directing it in a particular direction, On the other hand, we also explore the 11 virtuous factors. And so we can see we've explored how they've been beneficial for our body and mind, but now I guess it's up to you to sort of analyze within your everyday life and to see how they affect you. How do these actually affect your body and mind, these 7 virtuous mental factors, And by understanding the positive effect that they have on our body and mind, we actually will be able to develop a desire to want to increase them, to nourish them, and to cultivate them within our being. On the other hand, we also looked at the 6 root afflictions and the 20 secondary afflictions. And so these are, mental factors going to bring about experiences of suffering. And so if we want to be able to deal with our enemies, if, for example, if we are in a war scenario and we want to be able to deal with our enemies, we need to be able to, first of all, recognize them and be able to respond to them skillfully in order to be able to overcome this experience or this situation of suffering. And so it's the same, when we're thinking about attachment or aversion, there is a real need to sort of develop an understanding for what they are. Because, if we analyze, these states of mind, such as attachment and aversion, we can see how unrealistic they are in relation to our society. For example, now we live in a society where we're very much upon one another, and we see this interrelation that we have amongst each other. And so if we're able to see this in this way, we can start to sort of rid ourselves of these mistaken views of attachment and aversion, in a very sort of down-to-earth manner, because it's not, and it's not something. These mistaken views are not things which we're going to be able to get rid of ourselves, get rid of one day, in one day or immediately. It's something which requires a sort of slow reduction, and it's a slow process of reducing and eliminating these disturbing emotions within our minds. And so it's very, very important that we understand the mind and the mental factors, because like I just mentioned, if we want to go at war with our enemy and we want to be able to defeat our enemy, we need to be able to understand who our enemy is. We need to understand their situation. We need to understand where they're coming from. We need to understand how they affect us, what their strength is. And it's by having all this sort of understanding of the enemy which is before us that we'll actually be able to retaliate in a sort of appropriate appropriate and a skillful manner. So it is very much the same when we're dealing with our disturbing emotions. It is, thinking and developing an understanding of the 6 root afflictions along with the 20 secondary afflictions, which is very important, as well as understanding what the 11 virtuous factors are, and thinking about how these can be cultivated and how they can be strengthened within us.
Jima ane kandi gasare tacho di jang de di sen de ni te so na ne ya samcha do she na karze lozo chudon da tindi jine na pedo tindi lamne kandi gasare jima ane tanda shiba tharang do tindi gangla do na ya sare ya na ane yur shiba yir lan jik tang tindi yana deta shanda kandi go anane ngala ya le kiro cheese ane kandi gasare.
Also, and so now my question for you is, what would you like to do next? What would you like to make out of the next classes? What type of study would you like to pursue? Would you like to start to understand and unpack the different levels of mind? So this is referring to like the coarse and the subtle levels of mind, or would you like to start and think about how our consciousness engages into various objects, or would you like to study a completely different topic? So what would be appealing, and what would be something of interest to you? Please let me know what that might be. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.